Lovely talk. So, welcome to etc. This is our series of enrichment talks that surround some of our practical online sessions. We run online portrait drawing sessions, online life drawing classes, but we like to enrich our program with some conversations with artists where we ask them a little bit more about their work and about the journey that took them to this point in their creative careers. And every few months we have a different termly focus. So last term we were looking at drawing and graphite, particularly as a medium. This term we're looking at painting, and we're particularly picking out painters that work in oil paints, although that needn't be their exclusive medium. And we thought this would be a lovely opportunity to talk to Wendy Barratt, who is a wonderful artist, came to prominence for many of you, I think. Oh gosh, there we are. It came to prominence for many of you, at least kind of all around the world, in the Portrait Artist of the Year that happens on Sky Arts, where Wendy came away as the winner. And then that has, well, as we will find out, had quite an impact on her creative practice. But we've known Wendy for years. She's very kindly taught at Draw several times. She's been a really important mainstay of the creative community down on the south coast of England. And so we're very lucky to have had Wendy within our creative community. I feel very lucky to have known Wendy for some years. And so it's kind of doubly exciting to have been witness to her wonderful success in recent times. So we're going to be chatting to Wendy in a moment, and I'm going to put her on main screen. So if you make sure that just you can see everything as clearly as possible, if you go to view up in the top corner of your Zoom screen and just make sure you're on full screen, then when we go to the slideshow and have a look at some of Wendy's work, you'll be able to see that nice and large on the screen. And this is also going to be recorded for YouTube afterwards, so we'll put this up on our YouTube channel if you wanted to revisit any of it. But I'm just going to, in a moment, invite you, Wendy, just to say hi. And I'm not going to kind of give you too big an introduction because I think it's just really nice to be able to hear you talking about your work. So I'll just give you an option to unmute. And if it's all right, I'll pop you on Spotlight so that we can see you. Hello.
Excited. Thanks for a lovely welcome, Jake.
Oh, it is such a treat. I mean, you and I can talk for far too long, so I should probably keep it brief.
I know this is how long have people got?
Well, it is lovely to have you here. Thank you so much for being on, for joining us.
It's
Um,
lovely to be here. I feel very honoured. Thank you.
Shall we dive into the work?
Why not? No, well, we've got a lot to say, so we better get started.
With a wonderful picture of you in your studio.
Yeah, well, yes. I was just talking to Jake about this because this was I thought, oh, I need a photograph. So I thought, oh yeah, I'll do it myself. Actually, I asked Sarah if she'd do one, but she didn't feel up to it. So I was in between the camera setting off self timer, and after I got it set up, luckily my husband Fred walked in, and I said, oh, just press the button. So he took it really, but this is my studio, my converted garage at home, um, which yeah, I'm not in there tonight because at the moment it's complete chaos, which is it's lovely. I'm a very chaotic worker, but it's too chaotic for a Zoom.
I mean, it would be an authentic sign of productivity, but
It
perhaps
would
should make sure you've got an elbow room.
I've got lots of secret paintings going on though. That's the only
Okay.
problem. It'll be a whole load of drapes. Yeah. So yes, this is me in my studio. Do you want me to start talking about my sort of my very
Yeah.
beginning? So
Let's launch in. Shall I go to our first slide?
let's go to the first slide. Yeah. Um, I'll talk briefly about sort of my upbringing. I was brought up in the north of England to a seemingly unartistic family, but we were all very creative. My mum and dad particularly loved us all being creative. But my dad was a bank manager. My mum was a teacher. But my dad as I discovered, I've now got his sketchbooks. My mum gave them to me after he died, and just the most incredible uh, life drawings, figure drawings, very academic. I mean, he was very, very artistic, although I never saw him draw. His grandfather was a professional portrait painter. So that, whether art is in the genes, I don't know. But my mum was also quite creative. I remember watching her. I was in her class when I was about 6. And I remember seeing her drawing on the drawing board and thinking, wow, lovely drawings, and doing hand lettering for around the classroom, and loving it. And we were very encouraged in the creative sort of creative pursuits. Um, but I just loved art. My sisters went on to do more scientific subjects. I loved maths and the sciences, but I just always knew I wanted to do something arty. I didn't know what. I didn't know there was such a job as being an artist. I won my first portrait painting competition at the age of, I think I was 9. I painted the headmistress who was leaving, and I got first prize. So that was a nice bit of encouragement. So all through school, yeah, I sort of majored in, well, maths, but also majored in art. So it was that was my big main subject, was art. And from school, I then went on to do an art foundation course at Chester College. So this slide shows, these are my life drawings. So foundation course was where I first discovered life drawing. I'd been drawing a lot of figures, drawing a lot of faces up until that stage, but never been to life drawing. And as soon as we had a life model, we had one life model called Tatty. She was great. And I just absolutely loved it, and something just gelled with me. So it was a brilliant course. The guy who ran it was near to retirement, but he ruled us with a rod of iron. He was like very keen on drawing, getting us drawing. We did all sorts of different things, like, blind contour drawings. The top left drawing, one of us had to walk around the room, and we were all given sticks with a pot of ink and had to draw it with an old stick. We had to use bits of paper that we found on the floor, and using inks. I think the bottom right one, we had the model, and she was lit with all different coloured lights, and we just had to draw the colour. So it taught me a lot about drawing, and it was on this course that I fell in love with line. And Jack Shaw, who's the guy who ran the course, showed me how much just a simple line could do. And I have that really resonated with me, and is now shown a lot. It's shown in my work all the way through up until today. Even though I loved life drawing, I also loved design, and I really got into sort of lettering and working with symbols, colours, and everything. So I actually decided to go and do a graphic design degree at Manchester Polytechnic. So I did my degree was design for communication media, which was basically graphic design, and we had a great department, and it was twinned with the illustration department, which was a very prestigious illustration degree. It had some excellent illustrators on it, but it meant that there was always life drawing available. We didn't have to do life drawing, but it was always available. So I did quite a bit there as well. Um, from my degree, I then went straight in to working as a graphic designer. So I got a job working in a design agency in Buxton in Derbyshire, and I stayed there for 10 years. So, and also I've been a graphic designer up until really I won Sky Portrait Artist, but all the way through my career, um, my go-to thing has been life drawing. So the work I'm showing you tonight is work that I've done in my spare time and extra time around my sort of graphic design work. Um, so yeah, so from after 10 years of working in the design agency in Derbyshire, um, I was getting, I was getting sort of itchy feet to move on and do something else, and I was also getting more interested in painting and taking my art further, but I didn't know how to, and I also needed to pay the mortgage. So what did I do? My sister got a job working in the south of France, and she had two small children, and she said, "Oh, why don't you come and be nanny?" And I thought a long time about it, and then I thought, well, why not? I can take a year out. I hadn't had a gap year. I thought, take a year out, go and live in a foreign country, learn a language properly, not just school French, and do more art, see what I can do with my art. So yeah, if we can go to the next slide, Jake, that'd be good. So I went to France, and because I was living with my sister and her family, I was going out a lot to sort of better my language, and of course, I also wanted to better my drawing and painting. And I found that the two work really well together. So I joined. I found a life drawing play at school in Montpellier where I was living. I was living in a little village about 7 kilometers out of Montpellier. And this studio, as soon as I walked in, I just thought, this is for me. It was run by a wonderful woman called Bougie Dakar. And I was welcomed in straight away, and we did all sorts. Top right painting there, we made our own egg tempera. So she was showing us how to make egg tempera and just working into colours in light and shadow. We were working with inks and papers and sculpture, and then doing a bit of anatomy. And so it was a very, very sort of creative place to be. And if we can go on to the next slide, Jake, that would be good. I also joined, I lived in a little village, and there was a municipal art school, and I just saw they had an art class. And so I joined up. Art classes in France at the time, I don't know if it's still the case, they were heavily subsidized. So all arts and culture was heavily subsidised, and I think I paid something like £30 for a 10-week course to go to the local art school. And it was a lovely group, teaching me things that I'd already done, but you do them again. I mean, that's the thing about art.
Always worth going back over all of those lessons and finding new things, right? Every
Yeah,
time.
refresh and see it, and you can't just say, yeah, learn something, do it. Oh, I've done that. You need to do it again and again and again. But one of the key lessons that I learned, the thing that really resonated with me was when he taught us how to mix colour because I was wanting to learn to paint. I'd never oil painted before. I was now sort of early 30s and I'd never oil painted or painted in oils. And we just did a simple colour wheel, and he just t- s- talked us through on an evening colour theory and how to mix colours and use your complementary colours to desaturate. And it just clicked. I mean, I've been working in graphic design for 10 years, working with, CMYK, cyan, yellow, magenta, black. So I had been working with that sort of concept of mixing colours, and they all, just four colours can make any colour under the sun. Until you actually physically do it with paint, it didn't really click how I could make those colours. You see what I mean? And this was a key moment when we did the colour wheel. Then he said, choose any painting to copy. So I chose The Garden of Vallier by Paul Cézanne to copy. So this is my forgery of The Garden of Vallier. And it, this is just using cyan, yellow, magenta, and white. And from then on, I found mixing color is magical. You take one color, you take another color, you add them together, and it makes a third color. It's like, what? And I still find it very magical. I found it very difficult sometimes, but I find it very, very magical, and that's the key for getting you into something like that. So that was my sort of my little sort of things from France. I mean, France was a very, very magical time, and at the same time, I stayed there for 2 years with my sister, and then just at the time when my sister was moving back to the UK, and I was wondering what to do next. Oh yeah, my 1 year gap year turned into 2 years with her. But both art schools asked me if I would teach. Um, and I'd never taught before. And I just said, yeah, right. I just thought, why not? So I came, my mum had been a teacher, my sister went to be a teacher. And so I stayed down there on my own and started teaching. And I also, to sort of have enough money to pay the rent, I started freelancing. I knew that we could bring in sort of money to pay the bills. So that's when I started to freelance. Okay, if we go on to the next slide, that'd be good. So in 2000, while I was in France, I met Fred, my husband, who was running a French National Circus School, and then he wanted to move back to the UK. His daughter was living in Brighton, and I was ready to move. France was great; it was a very magical time, but I wanted to learn more about art, and I knew there was something more that I wanted to do. Um, and it was quite difficult. There were a lot of things that were easier to do in France, but it was quite difficult, especially in the south of France where it's very holiday atmosphere. And I found it quite exciting to sort of be coming back to the UK, where running your own business was a lot easier than running your own business in France. Um, so I started going to courses in Brighton was great because there was lots of life drawing going on and courses. So I did a couple there, working full time as a freelance graphic designer. So that took a lot of my time. Um, but I decided to, start painting some portraits, and this is the first sort of big portrait I did of Fred. in 2001, about a year after we came back. Um, this is, yeah, about 90 by 70 centimeters, this painting. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but I just was putting together everything I'd learned.
Mhm.
Um, and, I just started, worked through it on the canvas. And I started off quite tentatively with quite sort of thinnish washes of oil. Um, and I wasn't satisfied. And then I started looking at painters who I really admired, um, that like Lucian Freud, Taishan Scherenberg, um, but Bomberg, people who use lots of paint. And so I just got my palette knife out and started loading the paint on the canvas, and then it suddenly started working, and I suddenly started getting really excited about it. So this painting, yeah, was quite a move forward in my painting progress. It was sort of taught me a lot about what you can do with oil paint. Um, my drawing up to this stage was, I would always been a drawer, so up
Mhm.
to the age of, I think I was about 36, 37 here. But my oil painting, I was still quite tentative about, because I couldn't get what I got in my drawings, in my painting, but this was showing the first signs of me getting what I wanted out of the paint. Yeah, if we could perhaps go on to the next one. I forgot what.
Were you still using a CMYK palette, or were you broadening?
No, I was using more of a, yeah, of a palette. So after I learnt the sort of CMYK palette, I then started using, a palette of, yeah, like yellow ochres and cadmiums and ultramarine blues and things like that. So yeah, I had more of a fullish palette. But, knowing what a limited palette can do. So, yeah, sort of moving on, um, I did a lot, yeah, a lot of courses in Brighton, and then in 2006, Fred and I moved to Worthing, which is 10 miles along the coast from Brighton. And there wasn't a lot of there weren't the life drawing classes going on here. There were a few, there were very few and far between, not like in Brighton. But I noticed there was an art school right in the centre of Worthing, and a lovely 1920s purpose-built art school, which is sadly no longer there. It got moved to a um, uh, bigger place, Northbrook College. But at the time, I noticed they were doing a part-time fine art degree, and 2 days a week. And I think at the time I think it was £700 for the year. Can't believe it now. I think it's, yeah, a lot more now. And I just thought, oh, that's I'm going to do that, because it will get me out of my graphic design studio, where there are a lot of distractions going on, because graphic design is very demanding. Like, I want this and I want it now. So I thought that, I'll warn my clients for 2 days a week. I'm not going to be there. So organize yourselves. So I started at Northbrook College. I was also intrigued because up until then I'd been doing a lot of life drawings. I'm making competent drawings, but I didn't know why I was drawing what I was drawing, and I wanted more meaning and to find out who I was as an artist. Um, I was bettering my skills, but I didn't really know who I was as an artist, and I thought this might help me, which it did. And I didn't complete the 5-year part-time, I did 2 years there, but the 2 years were really, really valuable, and it showed me a process of coming up with ideas, work you wanted to do, how to work through them, how to do preliminary work, how to work those up into paintings. And this is a project that I did. They're working in around sort of figures in stations. So how figures in stations moved, the spaces in between them, how complete strangers could be so close. They're close 1 minute and away the next. And I found stations great places to draw because people actually stand there quite a while waiting for their train, looking at the boards, but you don't know, they could be gone in like 3 seconds, they could be gone in 5 minutes. So the bottom two left hand drawings are sketches that I made in the station. And I'd love quite a lot of my practice has been drawing around moving figures. So for me, I find this adds a dynamism to my drawing, to actually, to actually study drawing something that's moving. But I used my sketches and I made a lot of photographs. You weren't supposed to photograph around stations, so I just used to walk around with a camera around my neck and just click the button a lot of times. Um, but I worked at the top three along the top row are all sort of 1 meter square paintings that I made. I made a series of these. I think I made about six altogether, um, of just taking the figures, and especially the sort of the middle one. It's obviously two people who obviously didn't know each other. They just happen to make these lovely shapes together, and there's this sort of tension between them, although they're completely oblivious of each other. So, and how the figures in the background work with them, so that I became really interested in that. And then in the bottom right, I made a whole series of very tall, thin um, paintings on linen, showing the gaps and the spaces and the shapes between two people standing, which I really enjoyed. I enjoyed that project, and I always meant to do more, but it never. Graphic design took over.
But I guess the compositional skills from your day job are transferring into your awareness of space in the paintings.
Yes, yeah. It was actually, it was really interesting when I first went to work, my first job, and I hadn't, for a couple of years, I didn't sort of do any life drawing because, when you get your first job, and I was really keen and I was working all the hours. And, but then I was, I suddenly saw there was a life drawing class starting in Macclesfield where I was living, and I went to join it, and I really found, and the creative director who I work with, he noticed a change in my work, and I think one thing fed the other. At the time as well, I was, graphic design. You were working on the board, so everything was done by hand with marker pens and drawing things out. So I was drawing all day, every day, perhaps lettering and making up visuals of front covers of brochures and things. But so the life drawing fed, but it's all about composition, proportions, how colors work together. It's the same things whether you're making a painting or whether you're um, making a brochure in that respect. So yeah, I think one thing fed the other, and I found Um, life drawing kept me sane through, through my graphic design career. Yeah, do you want should we go on to the next one? I'm just trying to think what's oh yeah. Um, so yeah, after a couple of years, as I was saying, I decided to leave Northbrook because we'd moved from this lovely space in the centre of Worthing, and we were taken to the bigger campus just to the west of Worthing, and we didn't have the space. And I think because we didn't have the space, a lot of people weren't really going in, and that there wasn't that sort of art school atmosphere that there had been at the other campus. And that was the main reason I was going there. I already had a degree. Um, I loved the teaching, but I just thought this isn't working for me. So what I did was I left, but I decided I was going to look and spend some time doing some like week-long courses or weekend courses. You know, being on the South Coast, you're in an ideal location for traveling up to London if you needed to, or traveling to find places where I could study. And I suppose it's my love of maths, but I've always loved the process of measuring when I'm life drawing. So um, I love the expressive nature of life drawing, but I also love the rigors of life drawing. And I suddenly heard about this thing called sight size, and I was never quite sure what it was. And there was a school in London called the London Academy of Representational Art, and they were offering some courses. I think it was 6 Saturdays to learn how to sight size. And I thought, right, okay. So I went up every Saturday for 6 weeks, and I thought, oh, we'll be doing a drawing a day. You know, it was a whole day on a Saturday. I thought one drawing a day. No, it was one drawing for 6 whole days, which was blew my mind, completely blew my mind. Um, and working with H pencils, which I wasn't used to. But I loved the rigor of it. And I knew it wasn't for me full time, and I knew it wasn't the way I wanted to go on and draw for the rest of my life at all. But I knew it had a lot of very important lessons for me. It
Mhm.
taught me about, taught me to slow down, to really look again, look again, keep looking, um, all the way through the whole 6 days. Um, and, uh, you know, sort of control pencil and to, yeah, just about looking. So I found, and you get about 6 miles walk a day, which is brilliant.
That's it, the back and forth. Woo,
Oh
get
my
your
goodness.
steps in.
Yeah, but I found that really interesting. And I love, I've always, for anybody who I've taught, I always bring in a book by you and you Glow, and I love his paintings. I love looking at them, and of course he worked in a very very similar way, perhaps more so than you know, with plumb lines and constant measuring and putting little X's everywhere and reference points, and the mathematical sort of working out a puzzle side of me loved that and still loves it. But I haven't got the patience. So yeah, as you'll see as my work progresses, it's got elements of that, but not to that degree. So these are two paintings that I did from the drawing course I did. As soon as I finished the drawing course, they said, "Oh, we're going to do a week-long portrait painting course." So I went and did that with an artist called Luca Indricolo. And I think I did about 3 week-long courses with him at various times. And I did these 2 portrait ones, and I did a figure painting one, which I absolutely loved. And he taught me a lot, again, about slowing down, but also about, color mixing and things. I knew I didn't want to paint like this, but I knew it had some very, very important lessons for me. Again, to look again, really concentrate on your drawing and your painting. Um, and, a lot of it's about getting your tonal values right. Um, so very, very worthwhile. And then I think I met you at the station, actually, just after I come back from one of these courses, and you mentioned to me painter Tim Patrick, and he came and did a course at Draw, which I went to, and his teaching was great because it had his sort of atelier style, because he studied at an atelier, but also he studied at Brighton, so he had a freedom with his style as well. So it was much freer and working with big mixes and quite more expressive. So that really his teaching really suited me. So I learned a lot from Tim. That was great. Yeah, perhaps if we go on to the next one. Um, yeah, so these are um, I sort of I'd started up my own life drawing sessions in Worthing because there wasn't really something regularly, and I was traveling over to Brighton a lot to go life drawing, which was fine, but it was a half-hour train journey each way, and it was, and I just thought Worthing needs to be, have something regularly. So I set some up, and it was about in 2017. I just thought I really want to progress my life painting, and without having to travel so far. So I set up a Saturday morning portrait session, and I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't take charcoal and paper, that I had to paint. I realized that if I wanted to learn to paint, I had to paint. Um, and I still wasn't painting. I was painting fairly competently, but it didn't quite feel like me. I hadn't found my voice with the paint yet, and I thought the only way to do that is just to paint, 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 paint as much as I could
It's a
around
good bit.
myself.
I think it's good advice not to even give yourself the option of taking charcoal as well. Just once
Yeah.
you've actually got painting materials to work with, that's what you're working with.
Yes. Yeah. I recommend to anybody, if you want to learn to do something, don't take the thing that you're comfortable with. So my comfort zone was charcoal and paper. If you don't have those, you only have paint, then that's what you have to work with. So that's my advice. Put them out of sight. Don't make them available. And just, yeah, it was the best advice I gave myself. And it was there was just such lovely sessions, and I learned so much because you had, all these paintings are purely from life. So no use of photography or anything. So, and it's such great, um, yeah, great learning that you that, that it's just something I needed to go through, and it really moved me on. Being some of them, you can see I was influenced by artists. I mean, the third one along at the top, um, that was influenced by you and you glow. So I think that was Martine, and we got her to position herself in in a you and you glow model pose. I think it's the quarry of Padigliano or something. And yeah, and I love doing that one. So that painting is now in Italy. Somebody bought it. It's now in Italy, which is very because it's named after a quarry in Italy. Um, and yeah, the second one in that was sold to, and that's now in an Airbnb somewhere. But yeah, they all taught me a lot about paint and how to use paint. So yeah, if we can go on to the next one, that would be cool. Okay, so yeah, this is the beginning of the COVID years, which yeah, it was a really interesting time. And as you probably all felt, a bit disorientated, and especially, um, for people involved in things that you needed to be with people, it was quite disruptive. But I was amazed at how the artistic world and um, the what people who've been used to going to a studio and live models became creative and created those art rooms and things outside of that, and it opened up new ways of working. Um, so this is a painting I made of John Lydon, and I say COVID because I'd been introduced to a painter called Tim Benson, who was president of the Royal Society of Oil Painters at the time. And I'd been thinking about going up to London to do one of his courses when COVID hit. But he did a 2-hour online demo, which suddenly you had access to all these artists who were sharing their processes, and his way of painting was really inspiring to me. So like he said, just get cheap paints, like squeeze it out, squeeze loads of paint out, one big brush, just one big brush, and just pile it on. And I just loved it. And I think I draw in quite a sculptural way, and I'm always thinking about the the form and the sculpture when I'm drawing and painting. And he was sort of saying, just put your thumb on the bristles, and so it was almost like you had you almost like painting with your thumb. So it was a very tactile way of painting, and I got really excited about this. So I made this painting of John Lydon, which I really loved, sort of the movement of the paint. So again, you can see, the influence also of sort of like the Lucian Freud's people who use big amounts of paint. Now if you go on to the next slide, the interesting thing about the John Lydon was that I put it on Instagram, and a couple of months later, I got this phone. Well, it was an email, which I thought was a spoof at first, but it was from an ITV production company who'd seen the John Lydon portrait that I'd done on Instagram, and they were looking for a major prop for a new TV crime drama series called The Long Call, made by the same. Was written. It's based on books by Anne Cleeves, so it's made by the same people who made Shetland and Vera series. So I had to paint these two large paintings of the murder victim to be used in the filming. One had to be, it had to look like it was half done. So you can just see in the bottom right hand corner, that's a screenshot from the actual program. It had to be made to look like she was working, the actress was working on it. And then I had to do a separate painting, which was like the complete painting, um, which was interesting because I had to think of ways of doing that. Um, and I really, really enjoyed doing those. They were great. So that was a no, I don't particularly like the paint, but it was an interesting project. And also it started that, when you as artists, you work in quite a vacuum. I mean, with the onset of Instagram, it's less so because you're putting your work out there all the time. But some to get validation from somebody who you don't know or some external source, it's I think it's quite important for artists because it spurs you on and you think, oh, perhaps I'm doing the right thing. Yeah, do you want to go to the next one? Okay. Um, yeah, so during COVID, um, of course, I've been watching Sky Portrait Artist of the Year since it started. And during COVID, they started a Sky Portrait Artist of the Week. So every Sunday, they would um, have a live Facebook um, sort of portrait session. So they'd have a celebrity and they'd have one of the artists who either a winner or a finalist or a participant, and they would be painting this celebrity over Zoom, and they'd have interspersions from the judges and from Joan Bakewell. So it was great to paint along. It was 4 hours every Sunday, and some of my drawing room lot, when I set up drawing room, they were all doing it. So we were all WhatsApping, and seems like loads of people from all around the world were joining in, and there was a real sort of lovely buzz around it. I did the first one, and what you had to do, you had to take a picture. You didn't have to, but you take a picture and hashtag it. And then every week they would have prize, they do a first, second, and third prize. So the first one I did, I got an Instagram email saying, "Oh, you're in our top 10." I'm like, "What?" um, and that encouraged me. I didn't get a prize for that one, but it encouraged me to keep going. So I actually ended up doing all 18 of them, apart from one. There's still one I haven't done. Um, and it was great because I'd also thought I'm going to train myself to see if what I can do in 4 hours. Admittedly, some of these I did take a bit longer because you could spend some time during the week doing them, but a few of them were done in the 4 hours. So I was also seeing what was possible, and sometimes it's good to practice working quicker. And as previously, when I was talking about the atelier, it's good to work slower as well. But this was a good exercise in seeing what you could do in a quicker way. So I was using this technique of using lots of big paint. Sometimes I was using, I think this bottom right hand one, I used water-based graphite on a canvas, sort of canvas, just a sheet of calico, which created some quite interesting results. So that was nice to do. And if you go to the next slide, Jake, so I actually won. I won a third prize for my painting of Noel Fielding, which again was a huge validation. And I just thought, perhaps I've got something here. So it does, things like that. As we all know on Instagram, it's nice to get likes, isn't it? And it is quite a solitary thing to do. So it's nice to get those validations.
And at that point of relative isolation for everyone, it's nice to feel connected to that wider community of other
Yeah,
people painting from the same subject. There was a
yeah,
communality to that, right?
there was. And yeah, because we'd all missed that sort of connection, and suddenly we were getting it, even though it wasn't physical, it felt more physical, which was something. I don't know if you found this, Jake, but something that we never expected or was unforeseen until it was forced upon us. And you suddenly think, oh yeah, we've had a really nice meeting and really felt connected to those people. And yeah, it was a lovely thing to do. And much, yeah, I wouldn't have believed it before we did it. So yeah, that was good. If we go on to, yes, perhaps if we go on to the next one, I think I wanted to show you
Come back to drawing.
back to drawing now. Thought I'd,
As we always should. We should always come back to drawing.
yeah, yeah. Well, drawing is, I started with drawing the first, I didn't paint till I was mid-30s, and drawing has been and still is the main part of my practice. Um, and it made me realize that, if you drawing is probably 90% of it, isn't it? And I'll go on to speak in a bit about, how I now have a mindset of drawing with paint, because that helps me with my painting process. Um, but, drawing from life is, I do paint quite a lot from photographs, now, from a mix. I paint a lot from photographs, but I've constantly got that life drawing and painting from life as well. Um, and I think the two are a really good mix for me. Um, I like the solitariness of, I like painting a portrait and working it out by myself without somebody else in the room so they don't hear me swearing. But yeah, these, you know, the left hand side one again showing line and the way I'm looking around the form and keeping the pencil and the paper. And I love a foreshortened pose, perhaps that um, thing of measuring. You sort of have to adjust your gaze to see what's there in front of you, not what you think you see. So I find foreshortened poses perhaps easier because of that. You have to sort of not believe what you're seeing, if you see what I mean. Um, so that I've been working quite a bit on these drawings I've been making with pastel pencils, and quite enjoying the marks that follow the form, go against the form, drag around the form, not necessarily working in tone, but really studying the drawing. And the drawing on the right hand side is, again, working with figure and movement. And I really like, you're not thinking about producing a lovely finished drawing, but I always quite like the drawings I end up with. So I end up with concentrating more on the process and then quite liking the results of it, because you just have to go, you always have to start moving, like models moving, and then picking up little glimpses of bits that you notice a nice shape, and then suddenly they're making another shape. And it's so I quite like that way of working. So I do a lot of working, um with great vigor. So sometimes I'll say, right, I'm going to do a really measured get in the mindset, and then I'll just go, oh, just going to have a real free, lovely time. So if you want to go on to the next slide, this is a set of life drawings, just sort of demonstrate slightly how I treat the life room a bit as it's my laboratory. And I just think I go with a few different things, or I restrict myself, and just think, oh, what's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen, and just be prepared to explore, experiment. I don't have to, it's not a commission, it's not something that I have to put in a frame, it's just an experiment. And that's how you learn. So yeah, the drawing on the far left is charcoal, but then I also love using the Caran d'Ache Neocolor watercolor, water soluble crayons. So working with water and letting things drip and let the material do what it does, which I really like doing. And with my paint as well, it's you taking a material and trying to control it as much as you want, but letting it take control, which can bring something extra to your work. The top left with the blue one, so starting with I quite often like to start with a loose wash of ink just to get in the general gesture of the pose and the movement of the pose, and then build up my drawing around those marks. Charcoal drawing, so on the bottom here, sort of using calling quite an way. And then this drawing on the far right is sort of a more considered drawing, but not necessarily, finding little snippets of a pose that just seem to work, and how you position it on the page, and making it work on the page. So thinking about composition, and including, I just saw that uh, lovely muscle that runs from behind the ear to the collarbone, sternocleidomastoid, I think it's called. And then this lovely shape that's made by the side of the torso and the arm, and all the bits of form that around the armpit and the waist and the hip. Just finding little glimpses and abstract areas of the body, which those sort of tensions and form, that sort of really attract me, and how to use the pencil, um, and how to use your marks to say something about what you're seeing. Yeah, should we go to the next one? I think, yeah, these are some. So this is a portrait I made from one of the draw portrait online sessions of Erhan. And I really like this drawing. I think this is a 45-minute drawing, and I love the pose. And this was working on I thought, oh, I'm going to try working on I, 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 I quite often work on a Fabriano paper, something with a bit of tooth, but this was working on a Bristol paper, which is a highly calendared and smooth paper. And so the pencil was slipping all over the place. And, so I like mixing up my mediums and materials and seeing what they do and they bring. And this one, I think it really worked for me, and I liked the sort of the marks, some of twitchy marks, some hatching, some more vigorous than others. And I like the contrast of somebody in a very serene, calm pose, but with lines that are full of energy. He may be asleep, but he's alive, This is, when we're like drawing from life, we're drawing somebody who's very still, but they're living and breathing, and you know, the blood's running round at whatever miles an hour, and they could get up and run around the room at any minute. There's that energy. He doesn't look like he's going to, but there's that there's that energy within somebody who's alive that we're observing, even though they're still.
Mhm.
And I quite like to try and capture that in the way I draw.
It's interesting as well that this was from a
Mm,
screen-based session, but from a model that's actually posing in real time. So there's that sort
mm.
of element of the third space. It's not a still photograph, so you are still drawing from a real person that could get up and run around,
Yes.
but with
Yeah.
a slight sense of detachment. So it's lovely that you're still getting a lot of that liveliness
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
screen.
I found that interesting actually because I thought, oh, it's still a two-dimensional thing, but it does bring something extra. It's not quite as good as being in the room, but it's a close, and it's a close second, and it also brings other things. I found like running Zoom sessions online, you could also get poses that just wouldn't be possible in a live room, like aerial shots from the models set the camera from above, which, and you're all drawing exactly the same thing as well, which is an interesting thing, isn't it? Because when you're in a live room, you're drawing all the way around the person. Um, but yes, I like the Zoom sessions. Yeah, and of course you could do them 24/7 if you wanted to. So there's never any excuse that you can't draw somebody.
Mm.
Yeah, so that was another thing with COVID. Suddenly there was availability. You didn't have to say, well, I really want to draw somebody, but there isn't anybody. So, or we'll go and watch the telly instead. Now you can say, I want to draw somebody. Right. Who's online? Which is great. Okay, should we go to the next one? We'll go, these are,
I'll just note that we've overrun a little, Wendy. So
oh God, I am.
no, it's all right. I'm not going to stop you, but I'm conscious some people might need to head off. But
Well, I'll whiz through these because these are just showing some of my yeah, this is a line drawing from life. So just showing how much you can do with just line, no tone.
and really
Mm.
mapping the face,
Sorry?
almost kind of mapping the face.
Yes. I love that mapping. It is, and I've got to use that in my painting. So finally. So do you want to go on to the next one? Let's go on to the next one. Again, mapping in a different way, but finding form and structure. So this is from life again. Yeah, and perhaps go on to we can whiz through these ones until we get to, um, yeah, this was using graphite, so graphite powder and graphite pencil. So using all sorts of different marks. So I love exploring mark making and what you can get out of a certain material. But, as well as observing, I'm also listening to my instincts and feelings about the pose and how you're trying to sort of read how somebody feels as they're sitting for you. Um, Usually quite pensive. And I've heard, a lot of life models say they go into a meditative state. And so, yes, probably this shows Chris going into a lovely meditative state. Yeah, if you want to go on to the next one. Yeah, and again, so these are just showing what I think this was from an online.
Yes, it's with Kenzo from Love Life Drawing.
Yes, yeah, yeah. He was actually I sat through this one, but I ended up working from a screenshot because they just glanced sideways, and I thought, that's it. So it was just, it's looking for that pose that really you want to capture.
Mm.
Um, and it can just be the move of an eye or a twitch of a cheek, and you just think, that's it, and try and capture that. So yes, that's a big A2 charcoal drawing. I think that one's sold. Yeah. Okay, so if we'll get on to the paintings, I think. Yeah. Are you all right to go on, Jake?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. um, yeah, so looking at the drawings I've just shown you, sort of my love of line, and over COVID, I'd been listening to a lot of people. I also started. There's a Colombian artist called Nicholas Aribe, and he started doing online demos. And I was looking at artists who at the same time as watching him, I was revisiting artists who I'd loved for a long time, like you and you glow. Giacometti's paintings I love, William Coldstream, um, and looking at people like that and seeing that their drawing was evident in their paintings, and that was another light bulb moment because I'd always been frustrated that I couldn't paint like I could draw. And so I decided, and I saw with Nicholas Aribe, he was bringing drawing back into his painting, and he was actually drawing. And I thought, okay, what if I switch my mindset to, like, I'm not painting, I'm actually drawing with paint? And for me, that worked. And suddenly I was not afraid to bring those lines and redraw and show evidence of my drawing in my painting. And suddenly it was a light bulb moment. And I think this was one of the first ones that I paintings I did where I made it more evident that those lines were there and they were staying, and I wanted to show people those lines, and it was showing the energies around a still model. So this is working from a photograph from one of the reference photographs that Draw Patreon do of Castor. Do you want to go on to the next one? Um, and from there, I then got really excited about painting, and I felt that I was painting how I'd always wanted to paint.
Mhm.
Um, and something sort of really struck me. So um, I, I I was listening. I'd seen these videos of Richard E. Grant. I think he just lost his wife, sadly, and he was talking about his grief. But he's such a jolly. He was talking about about it in a very jolly way. But then suddenly he'd go into these deep, intense sort of moments, and I just took a screenshot, and I thought, I'm excited about that pose. It's just there's a real sort of gravitas to it, and I just started painting it and drawing. I started drawing with paint, making a drawing, and then drawing with the paint on top of that, bringing drawing back into the painting. Um, and I was really pleased with this painting. It sat on my drying wall for quite a while. And then at the beginning of 2023, I decided to try and see I didn't know where I was in the art world, and start to be a bit more serious about becoming an artist. So I thought, right, start applying for things. So I put this in for the Royal Society of Portrait Painters, and it was accepted. So that was a huge validation of, this is the painting that first time I felt some that I was really proud of something, and it felt like me, and it was accepted by this prestigious society. And I just, I thought, okay, perhaps I am doing something right. So do you want to go on to the next one? So at the same time, I was also making paintings. Just this is of a screenshot I took from a film of Frank Auerbach, um, and working with just seeing what burnt umber underpainting could do, uh, and seeing what the paint could do, um, how I could move it, and how I could bring line back. So adding alizarin crimson line back over the top, just in specific areas. And I intended to take this further, but it's sat on my drying shelves, and I thought I don't want to touch it. It's There's something about it that's so I've started work on another one, slightly bigger one, but I want to leave this one as it is, because it says something to me. There's a rawness about it that I really like. So that one's staying.
Do you have a lot of failures that you consider
Oh
to
God, yeah,
work? Yeah.
got enough. I've got
Does
enough.
it always work perfectly?
Um, no, there's no. My failures tend to be in the underlayers of my paintings.
And then you just cover it up with more.
Yeah. So to me, also a painting is about working through the the things that don't work. There are some paint. I mean, in my early days, I've got paintings that I thought I finished, but they're just not working, and they're in the attic. um, but I think as I've progressed, you learn of what can be resolved and how to resolve it. And oil paint is great because you can paint over the top, you can move it, you can rub it back, you can, you know, so there's layers and layers. Um, I think there's a painter called, is it Alex Kanevsky, and his paintings are a whole progress of beautiful paintings that he just keeps layering and painting over the top, and ends up with an amazing painting. But there's been about 20 beautiful paintings on the way that are in the underlayers, which I love that. I love that as well. So it's an interesting process. Yeah. Do you want to go on to the next one? I think we're nearly there. um, yeah, so about this time as well, I was also thinking, well, actually, this was sort of, yeah, a year before, I was thinking about entering Sky Arts Portrait as Artist of the Year, because a lot of people who came to drawing room kept saying, "Why don't you enter it, Wendy?" And I'm like, no, I don't like cameras. I'm always the one with the camera. Um, but more and more people who I knew had done it. So it became more accessible. And because I'd done the Sky Portrait Artist of the Week, that made it a bit more accessible. So it started becoming a bit more of a real thought. So I made this portrait about the same time as the um, Russell Grant one, Richard E. Grant, sorry. And I I don't find myself an interesting person to paint. So I took loads of selfies trying to find something, and I just took this one. I thought, yeah, I'm going to paint myself like that. So I did paint partly from life and partly from photo. and it went through many layers. So there are lots of failures underneath this final layer, which actually helps in the final thing. I think there were rubbings out, there were scrapings through, and you can see evidence of all those layers if you well, I know I can see them, but it adds to that final thing. Um, and I had no idea how far this portrait would take me. That sat on my drawing shelf for a long time, and I kept thinking, well, I've got to finish that. And then every time I went to finish it, I thought, oh no, I don't. I think it might be finished. And then it got to the beginning of 2023, and I just, oh, just apply, just do it. um, yeah, so I did, and see where it got me. But it also was accepted for the Herbert Smith Freehills Portrait Award last year at the National Portrait Gallery. So it was um, so thank you, judges. It's and on both counts for Sky Arts and for the Herbert Smith. So it was on exhibition at the National Portrait Gallery for 3 months last year.
I went to see it.
Oh, did you?
Very
Oh,
exciting seeing your work on the wall there. I mean, it's shouldn't be a surprise now, but it is very, very exciting.
it's still a surprise, Jake. Still a surprise, a really lovely surprise. It's the BP Portraits Awards, which is what it was. Has always been a dream of mine. And when I was 39, I applied because at the time you had to be under 40 to enter it. And yes, I didn't, of course, I didn't get in, but it was worth the wait. Yeah, I felt more ready for it now. Yeah. Um, so, yeah, do you want to go on to the next one? Have you got time for any more? Yeah. So
Good.
there's just this, yeah, thread. So yeah, going on to the Sky Portrait Artist of the Year. Of course, I'd never imagined to get as far as I did, but this was the um, this was the commission piece that I had to make of a loved one for the final. So I had there were 2 weeks between the semi and the final, but we had 4 days to paint the painting of your life, really. God blimey. So I had a week to prep, so I had a week to sort out how I was going to paint Fred, what size. So I did a big charcoal to the size I wanted to do it, got a canvas, prepped it up. But I couldn't put paint on canvas till the team had come and filmed and set up the time lapse camera. And then we were told 4 days' time we're coming to pick up the camera and the painting, which would have put the fear. Oh, I couldn't have imagined doing a big painting in 4 days before. Um, but I just was it by this time I was in that zone, and I just did it. So this is the painting I made. If you want to go on to the next slide, this I've just shown sort of progress of my process with these three just close-up details of Fred's head. Um, so my very first process is drawing with paint. Um, the second process is just banging in the colours, not sort of totally banging them in, getting them more or less right in more or less the right sort of places. Um, but this was the stage that I was often finding in my painting that my drawing would just drop. It would
Mhm.
just like when you're painting, you've got that challenge of coming away from the drawing because you're mixing colours and thinking logically, and my drawing would just so this is where I start to paint back in with a usually a red line, And so I was re-establishing, the middle one shows me re-establishing my drawing, which I find really works well for me. Um, and getting the drawing and get the drawing bang on and the tone bang on, then you've got a good chance of the painting succeeding. Um, and then the final one is me then going back over the colours, leaving some of the evidence of the lining.
Mhm.
And yeah, so that's sort of just showing a bit of the process of how I, how my work is working at the moment. Which
How do you know when to stop?
I like, if I've got the time, then I leave it. When I think it's finished, I like to leave it and keep looking at it and then think, right, it does need something changing, or you sort of, it's a gut feeling.
Mhm.
It's a gut feeling, and so far that gut feeling think has worked. I mean, I'm sure sometimes it won't work, um, but so far it seems to have worked. Um, and that's this I didn't really have that time to do that. It just had to be. I mean, this had to be finished because I had 4 days. I once went to a talk by Maggie Hamling, and somebody asked her exactly the same question: "When do you know when a painting's finished?" And I loved her answer. She said, "When it's sold." If only as artists were all so lucky. But yeah, so it was a great answer. Okay, do you want to go on to the next one? So yeah, this is yeah, this is the winning commission for the Sky Arts Portrait Artist of the Year, Dame Jane Goodall. Um, which was, yeah, this was the real painting of my life. Again, slightly time restricted, but I had more than 4 days. I had about, what to actually, from first marks on canvas to finish painting, it was about a month.
Mhm.
Um, but of course, I had sittings and work before that. So yeah, this is the final, which is on display in the History Makers Gallery at the National Portrait Gallery at the moment. Um, should we finish on the next slide? Because those are there are more slides after this, but perhaps this, it depends. You tell me when's a good time for you, but I just thought it'd be interesting to show sort of some of the preliminary work I did for the Jane Goodall portrait. So the top two in the top left-hand corner, um, it was quite a while till I could meet Jane. She's traveling for 300 days of the year, working. She's 90. I hope I'm like that when I'm 90. Blimey. So I listened to her podcasts, I watched her films, I made drawings of it. Luckily, there's lots of existing images of her online. So I made as many drawings as I could of her,
Mhm.
just to get to know her face. Um, but listening to the podcast and watching a film, you really get a sense of who she is, which was really important for this commission. And then, because I had two sittings with her, but of course you're also there with a film crew, and they do give you a nice time with um, with the sitter, but you do feel there is a pressure there. So I knew I had to get a good photograph as well. So the middle drawing, the big sort of line drawing, is something I made. Um, I was unsure of. I had two sort of compositions I had in mind. The bottom left one, that was something I had in mind with her slightly turned, and then the one of her giving that direct gaze. I got some lovely shots of her looking straight at me. Um, and she's an observer, and I just thought I want her looking at you when you go and see the portrait. So I decided on that composition in the end.
Mhm.
Um, so that was a to scale drawing I did to try and work out canvas size I wanted. Um, and I thought, oh, I'll do it 50 by 50, a square one. And I worked it all out, got the canvas, started painting on it, and I thought, this isn't right. It needs to be a bit bigger. So I went and rushed out, got a 60 by 60, and it just felt better. So I knew I had to listen to my instinct and my gut and not be overawed with the pressure. And I just, filled my room with music and pretended I was just in a normal little Wendy world. and, I, and I hadn't got this big pressure of the National Portrait Gallery on my shoulders at all. Um, and that made me listen to my instincts. The two little oil studies I did on the right hand side were just to try and work out a background color, and what I was going to do with the background. I decided on the lighter color. Um, and I didn't want to put anything jungly or too cliche in the background. But when I've been speaking to Jane in our first sitting, we were in her family garden in Dorset, and there was a lovely old beech tree that she'd climbed in as a child, and where she'd studied nature. So if you go back to the previous slide, um, the background, I didn't want to make it too obvious, but those are beech leaves. So that's to sort of reflect those beginnings of her becoming interested in the world and nature around her. And she said, I said, where would you most like to be in the world? And she said, you think I want to be back in Gombe in Africa? She said, but you'd be wrong. She said, I want to be here near my beech tree. And so yeah, so that was a nod to that without being too obvious. um, so that's Jane, lovely Jane. Do you want to do the final portrait?
Let's take us through the fun, and that will take us to half past, which I
Okay,
think we just right.
yeah, okay, brilliant. So I just thought I'd show you three paintings I've done since, the ones that I can show you. um, so yeah, the competition sort of suddenly I was launched, and I didn't, I wasn't expecting it, but it was lovely. And one of the first emails I got was from the PA of Loretta Mengele, who is the first female master of Clare College, Cambridge. And she asked if I'd be interested in painting a portrait. Of course, I would. Um, so I went along and met her, and she's the most wonderful, amazing woman. And I had a great time. And yeah, they decided that I was the right person for the job. So we had some sittings, and um, yeah, just got to know her. So this is probably the most formal painting I'd ever made. I didn't, well, me and Loretta didn't want it to be too formal. Um, she's a very sort of family orientated person, and she just exudes warmth and sort of she's a real person. She's like, really interesting. So she's not wearing her robes, but she wanted to be in the chapel, which is her love is singing and being in the chapel. So we had her with a hymn book, and she was singing while I was taking photographs of her. And I did some sketches of her as well, and we had a long chat, and we listened to her sister singing jazz. Unfortunately, it's her late sister. Um, so yeah, this is quite a big portrait, and it's now hanging in the grand hall, right opposite a portrait by Brian Organ. So yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, I was very honoured to have got that work, and lovely to have met Loretta. So do you want to go on to the next one, next slide?
And
Um,
usually at this point, you're really pretty much full-time portrait painting. Your
yeah,
career has taken a turn.
yeah. So as soon as I won, as soon as I knew I actually won in sort of the May 2023, and I said, right, that's it for graphics. I've done enough. So I decided I'd tried doing the part-time graphics, part-time fine art, and it didn't work. Um, it just wasn't working. It was too much of, you had to be fully immersed in one and then fully immersed in the other, and it was very difficult to go from one to the other. It was too, I couldn't give my all to both, and I wanted, now was the time. Yeah, I'd given 40 years to graphics, and this is something I've always dreamt of doing. So I owed it to myself to do what I wanted to do. So I'm now working, yeah, full time as a portrait painter. So yeah, Martin Joseph is a sort of folk musician. He tours the world, songwriter, and he got in touch with me. He sort of writes songs around sort of very lovely socialist issues, runs a charity. So he came over and for a couple of sittings, and just after I won Portrait Artist, I was in touch with Cat Art and Lizelle Thomas, and she asked if I'd be interested in, had I thought of joining the CBPP, which is the Contemporary British Portrait Painters. And I said, well, you're definitely on my radar, but I didn't think I was like, she goes, oh, you ought to drop them a line. So I did, and yeah, so I was accepted as part of the Contemporary British Portrait Painters. So this was that, just as I became a member, they'd already organised an exhibition. They said, oh, we've got room for one of your paintings. So Martin very kindly said that I could use his commission to exhibit there. So this was shown in Brixton last year, but it's now in Wales with Martin, and that was a lovely portrait to paint. He's got really interesting face and a very interesting man. Um, so yeah, quite some beautiful songs, and I'm very interested in music and musicians, and I'm just starting to work with a couple of musicians on possible portraits for my own personal work. Um, so there's some ideas brewing there. um, and then finally, I think the final one is the portrait, another portrait of Fred. he's,
Lovely.
Fred is a great model. So this is one that yeah, in the January 2024, I thought, oh, I've got to enter opens again. So I made this portrait of Fred to apply for the Royal Society again, and very honoured that they accepted this portrait, which was shown last year at the Royal Society of Portrait Painters. So yeah, and yes, I really like this painting. It just, yeah, says a lot about, yeah, the person I know. Um, so that's me at the moment. I've been working on a lot of big paintings, applying to open calls, still working through a list of commissions, which is, I feel very privileged to be doing. And just, I know I've got a lot more to learn, and um, a lot more to develop in my work, but the way you're going to develop is by doing it. And that's what I want to do, and that's what I'm very privileged and honoured enough to be able to do.
It's so exciting to see that having kind of put in the work, an entire lifetime's worth of work into drawing, into painting, and enjoying that process and having that running in parallel with your working life. You're now bringing all of those things together into a career, but also into the development of a practice that feels just really exciting in itself. And you've
Yeah,
been showing up the whole time. You've been showing up for yourself and for your practice. I think it's so inspiring, Wendy.
thank you, thank you. It's it's been hard work, but I've loved every minute. I'm loving every minute. It's it's yeah, I think it's just what I'm made to do. It's I think me and my sisters were all quite similar. We're led by what we love doing, and I think that was instilled in us with our parents. My mum always said, when I was young, she said, "Don't worry about going to study something where you think you're going to earn a living. Study something you love doing." And very wise words. Work hard at it, and yeah, wise woman.
I think that's a lovely sentiment to draw us to a close. Um,
Mm.
I was hoping we'd have some time for questions, but I think it's probably better that we let you get on with your evening and have a lovely rest. And I feel like you've answered so many questions preemptively,
I hope so.
Wendy.
I hope so. Sorry, I filled it with Wendy waffles.
The best kind of waffles. It's been such a pleasure, Wendy, to hear about your work.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank you.
and thank you for your generosity for all of the time you've given us.
Oh, it's absolute pleasure. And keep in touch. Anybody wants to drop me a question, I'm on Instagram, and message me. Yeah. Oh
You get
God, what have
that flurry.
I?
Well, thank you so much, Wendy, and
Jake. Thank you, everybody.
I yeah, hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.
I will do. Big glass of wine and a hot bath.
Well deserved. Well, you get to your bath, you have your glass of wine, and
Will
thank
do.
you everyone for coming. Thank you so much, Wendy.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.